Hello, everyone. In this session, we will try to understand how to read data in pyspark. There are two important concepts. One is user enforcement schema, another is StructType schema. These are the two important concepts which is required in order to understand how to read data. But there are other small nuances. If you don't understand those, you might get error. You will have to call back into Google and then check overflow. In that case, you will just waste your time. So if you understand, if you look into this session, you should be able to get through any sort of a data problem that you might think of. Okay. So let's jump into action. So if you already have a video, this is spark dot read and then dot format. Format that we are going to use here is CSV. I'll put volume small cap and then you put another dot and you put load. Okay. And then you have to give a path. Before you give a path, before the quotation, we start with R, okay, or else we'll get an error. In case if you don't get an error without R or with R, you can try without R as well. Okay. And the data that we're going to read here is sales data. Okay. Let's take the data in the data, in Spark session itself. So it's going to take some time. The data which we are reading, I'll just show you the size of the data. Okay. So my intention was to read this big data. I'll rather take this data. Okay. Big data. So it's a 3 GB file. Okay. Okay. We have read the data here, but I'll go with the big. It read instantly. Okay. Now I'll load df.show. That's a 3 GB data. And the interesting thing is how quickly it gets read. So if you read it this way, this is reading raw data file, and if you see the header, PySpark has decided C1, C2, C3, C4, starting with C0. Okay, and if you see the actual header we had in the data set was null, observation. So, okay, okay. Now what we simply see is the string schema. We have dot string schema, which is very important when you work with PySpark. You have to be very cautious. So if you look, everything when you read it just by default, everything has been read as string. String. All the data types are string. When you had date, you see unit cells, dollar cells, which should have been in a long or integer format. They do have been considered. Okay, we will see in every aspect. Okay, now reading data with header. So now we'll try to use a sort of same format, but I'll change the pattern the way you code in Jupyter Notebook. So if you see, I'm going to make it Spark here dot read. Okay, I'm going to put a backslash so that I can continue in the next line, because if I try to put everything in one line, it looks little clutter. So moment you put a backslash, that only it would intend that you are going to the next line and going with the rest of the code. So again, you know that we'll do with the dot, because after read there is one dot and then we try to code the rest of it. So after dot, again we'll put load, but before not load, first of all format. Okay, format, and format is our CSV. I'll put a backslash again. I'll go to the next line, and then I'll put not load this time. This time I'm going to put header option. So that's going to be an option. Okay, and here in option you can put a cross quotation and then put header, and then you say in quotation true. That only it means that you want header. Okay, don't forget to put a backslash, because you write everything in next line. This way it will look very organized, and that's the industry practice. Load. And now I'm going to load here. I'll take the same path. Okay. I'm going to take the same path and I'm going to paste it there. So this, as I showed it to you, the file size is 3 GB. And we saw then, when you read the raw data, instantly it read it. Okay. But let's take it this time. Okay. This time to read it instantly. Let's quickly check the data. I'll do df.show, but this time I'll just not do show. I'll put 5. Rather than showing the top 10 observations, this time it will show top 5 observations. Okay. Now if you see my header has come, you can ignore this because this is a serial number. Okay. 0, 1, 2, 3. This is nothing but a serial number. By default, since there was no header, it has considered 301. So my header has come. But interesting thing would be to see what is the string schema this time, which I assume again everything is going to be your string. But let's check it out. Yeah, like I said, everything has been in a string format. Okay. Okay. So next, now that you've understood that if you have to read the data, you'll have to read it using this. If you want the header, you'll have to put header equals to truth. Okay, header truth as an option. But yeah, there are data sets where you will not have any header at all. You just have the values. In that case, you can read with this But the correct industry practice is trying going with user enforcement schema or StructType schema, which I'm going to come very shortly. But let's understand that when you're getting all string, why is it happening? Okay. In order to deal with this, there is another thing called as insert schema. Okay. This is what I'm going to try in the next cell. What I'll do is, in the interest of time, I'll just quickly copy over this data. Okay. And then I'm going to paste it here. So everything being the same here, I'll put another option now. Okay. And that option should say an inference schema. Okay. Infer schema, and I'll put it true. Just as you know, header, and then you put it true. So infer schema true. So true is spelled it. Now let's check how quickly it runs, because I'm trying to infer the schema of the data set. Okay, not what system will decide. So yeah, if you see, I've forgotten the backslash here. Okay, now you see it's taking time. Taking a lot of time actually now. Yeah, it should have read by now. So what's going on? Let's take into the cluster. Okay, we will look how is it happening there. Okay, if I just go into the job here, you see there are 30 tasks in assigned here, and we are currently at 0. So you can understand how long time it's going to take. So if I just go into the set, you will see it start. It only means the cluster is still running. So what I'll do in the interest of time, I'll just kill it. This is just to show you while you try to, when you try to insert schema, what are the problems that you're going to face in case if your data is huge. So in my case, I showed you this is a more than 3 GB file. So you're going to get this suffer error. Okay. So I do get it. Now I'll read a small data with the insert schema only. Okay. And then we will check the schema of it, because this will bring the schema of the data set. In my previous execution, my intention was to show you that while you insert schema and if we have a big data, uh, this could be a little problematic. Okay. So if you see it's running, it should not take a lot of time. Now it has run. The execution is done. Okay. The interesting thing would be to see the print schema. So I'll quickly jump into the print schema rather than showing the data set. I know the header and everything would have come properly. If I look into the print schema now, the date has been read as a string itself again. Okay. The product ID is integer, which it should be. Product category is string. Unit cell is integer and dollar cell is integer. So everything is correct except for the date. Now, if I go back to the data to show you, the date is being taken as a string here itself when you try to insert the schema. The product ID was integer, unit cell was an integer, dollar cell was an integer, and product category was a string, which itself should be string. Okay. Now, yeah, these are the problems that I wanted to show you. Because when you try to probably you can try to work with inference schema, which is a very easy way to go with. But likely you're going to go ahead if you have to do a data wrangling with respect to your date, you'll have this problem. Now you saw this problem with the date. At times you're going to see a problem with product ID or you need dollar sales, which by chance again could be a string. So those are little problems that you face with inference schema. Okay. Now let's try to see, since date was an issue, what is actual default data format in pyspark? Date format. Sorry, default date format in pyspark. Okay. In our data set, if you go and see, the date format was actually, this is the date format. Okay. Have I read it as a string? Okay, let me quickly check. Okay, no. So if you go to the data set here, and the sales data set, which has been considered as a string here, if I quickly look, let me do a head and check. Okay? Or let me show you, I do have it open. The sales data. This is my sales data. And look at the date format. Date format is DDMMYY. YYY. I mean 4Y. Okay. So this was a date format given here. So when I try to read this data, it gave me string. Okay. But default data type in PySpark, if you go into the the actual documentation, it says it should be YYY format, then your month format, and then your DD format. That's the actual format it should be. So I have another file which says date cells, and see I have this data which is by default, if it is read, okay, it should not give me a string format, rather it should give me a date format only. So we'll check that only there. Okay. So I'll quickly read this data, and what I'll do in the interest of time, I'll just copy this and paste it, and then I'll read the data called named as date cell. Okay, that's the data it was. Okay, it has been read. Now I'll quickly do print schema here. Now if you see, as I said, here it is saved as a date format. Okay, because the data set fortunately had a format which pyspark understands. Okay, but in this case it was not. I showed you the format which was given here was different from what pyspark understands. Okay, now more often than not, you will always find a situation that your data set would have data which pyspark don't understand. Okay, so that is the time you need to deal such situations. So now let's look into the very important concept, which is user enforcement schema. What is user enforcement schema here? We have to define the schema first of all. So schema, I'll say cell. That's the name that I'm going to give, and I'm quickly going to define the schema. So the column that I have is date. I'll quickly put date here, and the date should be in date format. I'll mention date, and then I have to put comma here. I have product ID. I'll quickly put product ID here, and product ID should be in long format. The long and the integer format is same thing, but it is set aside to go with long because long has more capacity than your integer format. Okay, same product category. Product category will be in a string format. I'll put comma again. And then we have unit cells, which is again a long format. And put comma again. Dollar cell. Again, a long format. Okay. So now this is done. What I'll do is I will again copy this part of the code, which is again going to be the same, but there are some changes that you need to do. Instead of all of this, what I can do is dot format, and I'm going to put schema. Schema equals to this. Okay. And I'll put a backslash, and the data that I'm going to read is the sales data. Remember, the sales data does not have the correct default pyspark date format. Okay. So what happens? Let me check. Okay, it ran through very quickly. Let me look into the data now. ds dot show mention 5. Yes, we saw 5 observations. Okay, here it gave me an error. Okay. Let me check what is the error it said. What is the star failed? Okay, behavior parser is an issue. That's what I see. Parse date time. That's an issue. Now, if you go right at the bottom, see it says that could not parse at 0 index. The reason being the date format in the sales data was not in a default date format. That is the reason why you are getting this error. Okay. So now to deal with such situation, what you do, you call it out. Okay. And so in the next line, okay, let me show it here. I'll copy the code as is. Okay. Whatever code I have, I'll copy it as is, and then I'll put one more line. Here it should say date, sorry, option, and then you're going to put date format, and then you're going to put it here as whatever date format your data has. Okay. Currently, as I showed it to you, it has ed, mm, and yy. That's the format you have it in your data set. So you are calling it out. Now let me execute this. So it ran. Now let me do df dot show, and I'll do 5. It should have 5 instances. Now it correctly read the data. Now there is one issue. The issue was that I did not read the header because it is considering my header too, and as well as the header of the data set. So we'll have to quickly give one more option, which you know by now, header equals to true. Sorry, you give it an option here, option, and then you say header read it. Okay. Now you see it correctly. It has correctly come. Now we'll quickly look into the print schema, which is very important to us. Okay. Now date has been read as a date. Okay. And the other product as long, product category as string, unit long, as the way you have decided here, the same way it has expected it. Okay. Yeah. Now that we understood, like date format is very important. Now the same thing wherever we got stuck, right? When we tried with inserting schema, had we put the same thing, this date format here, it would have accepted it here as well. Okay. Yeah. The last type that you have this I have already showed it to you. So I'll just this I've already showed this date format. Okay. Now the last thing that I have is struct schema. This is also very important. So for this, you need to first of all install certain packages. Okay. I'll quickly take a help of this, and I'll explain you what are the packages I'm going to import. So we have from pyspark SQL type, we are importing StructType, structure, string type. String type is nothing but your string. Okay, data type and then integer type. Sorry, this is date type. Okay, so yeah. Now to do this, first of all, I'll have to call out just the way I have made the schema. I'll make the schema here also. I'll define the schema here. I'll name it as struct schema struct, and now let me define it. Okay, the first thing first, you're going to put struct type, and then you're going to put a bracket, and then immediately put a list. Okay, so inside this first bracket and then a list, you're going to put your all the columns. But before you put all the columns, you let the PySpark know that you're going to put the field, struct field, nothing but columns. Now you can put all the columns. The first column that I have was date. I'll quickly copy this. Okay. And what type do you want? Sorry, it has to be in a quotation, okay? Because it's a column name in a quotation. And the type that you want is date type. Okay? Now, another important thing that you need to remember, you have to put open and close bracket immediately after this. And after that, you're going to put it true. Okay. So, and this, sorry, this should be cat. Now, this true, it signifies that in case if you have a null present in your date column, then it is going to accept it. But if you put it false here, if you put it false here, then it is expecting no null value. All the values should be in date and it should be properly coming, no null values. So at that time, in case if you have null, you will get an error. So rather, it is always recommended to put true, okay? Because we don't know. Now, since I have to put all the field, I will first copy paste it and then I'll change the name. So since I have done with the date, I'll take product ID and the product ID should be in an integer type. So if you remember, we put a long type here, we're doing it with the integer type. So you might not get confused here. Product category, and product category of a string type. We have another called as initial, and it is again integer. The last is dollar cell. Again, it's integer type. Okay, I am all done defining the schema. Okay, if you know it, you can do it very quickly. Now, what I'll do is let me quickly run this. Okay, I've run it, and now let me copy paste this. Okay, this is nothing but reading. So the changes will be I have defined a struct schema, right? Let me put this. Okay, the date format, everything will remain as is. If I now run this, and go into the next line, and let me do ds.show. It is able to read all the data. Now we'll quickly obviously the schema type. Okay, ds.stream schema. So it has read correctly. Okay, all the data properly. So if you ask me a question now, is StructType and user enforcement schema is the two-way only which we can change the data type? No, there is other way also you can do it. If I go right on the top where I have read the data, okay, and let me see here. This is the big data. Another small data that I have read was this, right? Here also you have come across string. Okay, I'll read this data again. I'll execute this in schema. It's going to be a string type. Okay, but here I'll show you what is another way you could have done it. But before that, you need to import a package, okay, from pyspark dot sql dot function import to underscore this, okay, and then in order to make a change, okay, you have to create a new column. That's the only pane that you have, okay. Here, which column is the command? If you want to append, if you want to make any change on the data frame, making a new column. So which column is the command? And then you say, give it a new, new date, because you cannot tamper the same column. Okay. that has to be as is. You can drop that column and keep the new column here. So I'm going to name it as a new date column, new name, and then to date is the function which you just imported it. And the changes that we're going to make these changes to df. The name of the column was date, and the format that we have was, what is the format, dd. Then we have amen, and then y. That was the format of the data we have. Okay. So what I'll do instead is I'll do quick show also, and at a one go we'll run it. Yeah, the data has been read correctly. There is no error. We have new data that has come. Okay, between the date, which was the way pyspark read it, which is not a default format, and that's not that's a string format. But if you see the default format of pyspark, the way it reads, this is the correct format. So I'm assuming it has all gone correct, but let's confirm it. Doing df dot print schema. So now that if you see, your new date is in a date format, but the original date we had was in a string format. So this is also another way of doing it. Just a small